Great Bible Truths, day 99. The second coming, Matthew 24, 1 through 51. So we're going to read this whole chapter. Now, there's no way we could do this whole chapter justice in exegeting the context, but we're going to try in 10 minutes. Let's see what we can do. The signs of the end of the age. Jesus went out from the temple and was going on his way. His disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these things?" Talking about the temple. "Don't you? Most certainly I tell you, there will not be left here one stone on another that will not be torn down." So Jesus tells them as they're looking at the temple, guess what? You think this temple's beautiful, but it's going to be destroyed. This is the context of what's to come. Verse 3, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us when these things will be. What is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Notice there are two questions there. And I believe, my opinion is that Jesus attempts to answer both of those questions. And some see it as one question, some see it as multiple, more than two. But I think that it'll help us grasp, at least from my view, as I've come to understand it, if we see the two-part question there, it'll help us to make sense of the paradoxical statements that are to come, such as, no one's going to know when he's going to come, and then he's going to give you all these signs to look for his coming. I think he's answering two different things. One, when will these things be? The destruction of the temple. And two, what will be the sign of your coming? Hence, the second coming. Okay? Hopefully that's simple and understandable. Jesus said to them, "Be careful that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will lead many astray. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you aren't troubled, for all this must happen, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, plagues, and earthquakes in various places. But all these things are the beginning of birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to oppression and will kill you. You will be hated by all the nations for my sake, for my name's sake. Then many will stumble and will deliver one another and will hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. Because of iniquity will be multiplied. The love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end, the same will he be saved. This good news of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world for a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come." Okay, there's a lot in there to unpack. But I do believe Jesus is speaking here of not to be led astray by the people saying, hey, the Messiah is coming, and all these wars and rumors of wars. Let's keep reading just for time's sake. I don't know that we can unhash all of it, but basically he's telling them false prophets will come and they're going to try to lead people astray. The love of money of many will grow cold, probably for money. They'll go after other things, but the end is not yet. So when therefore you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take out the things that are in the house. Let him who is in the field not return back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are with child and to nursing mothers in those days. Pray that your flight will not be in the winter, nor on a Sabbath, for then there will be great oppression, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, nor ever will be. Unless those days be shortened, no flesh would have been saved, but for the sake of the chosen ones, those days will be shortened. Then, if any man tells you, behold, here is the Christ, or there is the Christ, don't believe it. For there will be false Christ and false prophets, and they will show great signs and wonders, so as to lead people astray, if possible, even the chosen ones. Behold, I have told you beforehand. If therefore they tell you, behold, he is in the wilderness, don't go out. Behold, he is in their inner rooms, don't believe it. So, for as the lightning flashes from the east to the west, and is seen even to the west, so it will be coming of the Son of Man. For wherever the carcass is, there is where the vultures gather together. Now we got to stop there because there's so much to unpack that we just can't keep going. So first, how do we make sense of Jesus saying the gospel will be preached to the entire world? Okay, so if I'm talking about this being a localized destruction of the temple, which that's what the disciples asked him, how did that happen? But two, the second question I would ask those who would say it is speaking of the end of the world and not the temple is, why does Jesus say, pray that your flight will not take place on the Sabbath? If the Antichrist were to show up today in the world, would we say, oh, it's Sunday or Saturday, I can't flee to the mountains? He literally says, let those in Judea flee to the mountains. Pray that it doesn't take place in winter, because in that culture, in that time, right, if it's cold, they're going to be burdened. We just say, like, turn on the heater. Jesus, what are you talking about? So we have to understand that he's speaking of a specific context. There, the carcass is, that's where the vultures will gather together. He's talking about dead bodies, right? Vultures see carcasses. That's why he's talking about the destruction of the temple. The context is clear. The abomination which causes desolation is a reference. If you look in Luke's version, he just says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, speaking to a Gentile audience. Matthew, speaking to a Jewish audience, refers back to Antiochus Epiphanes, the Greek general who surrounded the temple and took over the temple and sacrificed a pig to Zeus in the Maccabean revolt. So he's using a phrase which the Jews would understand to be a foreign general marching in and taking over the temple. That's literally what they would think of. That was the abomination of desolation when a Greek general rode in and sacrificed a pig to Zeus in the temple. So Jesus says, when you see that, these Roman armies, these Gentile armies are going to come in, surround Jerusalem and destroy it, and they're going to kill all the Jews, because what happened was a false Messiah rose up and made the people think it's not Jesus Christ who's the real Messiah, it's me. And he led all these people to follow him. They drove away the Romans, and for like a year or so, the Romans, or several months, the Romans leave, but they didn't leave forever. They came back and they got reinforcements. That's why Jesus says, flee. When you see these signs, flee. Get out of Jerusalem, because its destruction is nigh. Now, back to the verse about this gospel will preach to the whole world. You would say that didn't happen. Well, the term world there would be a term which would be simply Roman Empire. We're not talking about the cosmos, which would be the entire universe, or even the term world, which would mean the entire land, but it would literally signify the world, or the land, or the tribes even, you could say, of Israel. But it wouldn't be that specific. It would just really be talking here about the gospel going forth by 70 AD. That's when the temple was destroyed all throughout that Roman Empire. So these words matter, because in English we just think the entire world. That's why Paul even says, the gospel which I preach to you, which has been preached throughout the entire world. He uses the same phrase, saying, the gospel I'm preaching to you has been preached to the entire world. Prior to 70 AD, prior to the temple being destroyed, Paul makes the claim that the gospel has went forth to the entire world. How? Because he's not talking about the entire universe. He's talking about saying the gospel is going to go forth from Jerusalem to Judea and to the ends of that region, okay? Now, the coming of the Son of Man. Now I think Jesus is going to switch gears from answering, when will these things be? Meaning, when will one stone not be left upon another and the temple will be destroyed? And there's all these signs to look for and how to get out and run for your life, to all of a sudden now, there's not going to be any signs. So I think now he's answering the second question, which is, when will the end come? The absolute end of the world. Okay, so, but immediately after the oppression of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. This is apocalyptic language, talking about governments will be overthrown and regimes toppled and so on and so forth. And the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of sky with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a great trumpet, and will gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Now, I apologize. That is not the transitional verse. It's been a while since I read through. He's still talking about the temple there. Why? Because he is talking about this turmoil that will happen. The Son of Man will appear in the sky. All the tribes, I like how this version actually does translate it, tribes, not peoples, because sometimes people say, well, all the people of the world are going to see him. No, he's talking about the tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes, that's a reference to them, will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming. How are they seeing the Son of Man coming unless it's the second coming? He's coming in judgment. He's coming on a cloud, Revelation says, right? So in Old Testament, God rides on a cloud to Babylon. When did God ride on a cloud to Babylon? He rode on a cloud to Babylon to destroy it. This is apocalyptic language Jesus is using, saying the tribes of the earth, the Jewish tribes who rejected Christ as the Messiah, they're going to see him coming on a cloud of judgment. It's a referent of judgment. It's apocalyptic language. God is going to ride into Jerusalem and destroy it. Okay? Now, it's not the transitional verse yet. Paul, take that all back. We'll get there. Now from the fig tree, learn this parable. When its branch has now become tender and produces its leaves, you know that summer is near. Even so, you will see all these things and know that it is near, even at the doors. Most certainly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things are accomplished. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So Jesus tells them clearly there, everything he just said will come upon what? This generation. Some people say, well, this might mean like that generation. No, he says all these things will come upon this generation. A generation is 40 years. Jesus makes the statement in around 32, 33 AD. So if 40 years is a generation, you could do a simple math and say, okay, by 72 AD, all these things should be filled. Guess what? They were. Everything fits perfect. There's no need to push this to the way distant future, to some future temple that has to be destroyed. He's talking about the Jewish temple that is there right before their eyes. Now, this is the transitional verse. But no one knows of that day and hour, not even the angels in heaven, but my Father only. So he just gave them all the signs to look for to get out of Jerusalem when the temple is going to be destroyed and to flee. But of that day or hour, speaking back to the question, when will the end of the world come? Of that day or hour, nobody knows. I can't give you any signs. So this is what he says. As the days of Noah were, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. As in those days which were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and given in marriage until that day that Noah entered into the ship. And they didn't know until the until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. So basically, just like when Noah was building the ark and no one was paying attention and then destruction came, that's how it's going to be at the end. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. 2 men will be grinding in the mill, one will be taken, one will be left. Watch therefore, you don't know in what hour your Lord comes. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what watch of night the thief was coming, he would have watched and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, also be ready, for in an hour that you don't expect, the Son of Man will come. So some see that verse as a reference to the rapture, that one will be taken, raptured into heaven, one will be left on earth. I rather see that as a reference here to the end, the second coming. One will be taken to life, one will be sent to judgment. But he's using just descriptions here, analogies here, to tell them they're not going to know. Don't try to predict the end of the world. Don't try to predict the date, because it's going to be like 2 men just boom, boom, and it's over. Nobody knows when. Okay. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his Lord has sent over his household to give them their food in due season? Blessed is the servant whom his Lord finds doing so when he comes. Most certainly I tell you that he will set him over all that he has. But if that evil servant should say in his heart, my Lord is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants that eat and drink with drunkards, the Lord of that servant will come in a day when he doesn't expect, and in an hour when he does not know, and he will cut him to pieces and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There is where the weeping and grinding of teeth will be. So clearly there, if it wasn't clear from the previous passage that we're talking about judgment there when Christ comes back, he made it very clear. Be on guard. The believer needs to be ready at all times. Christ can return at any moment. We don't try to predict. We just live faithful to Christ. So don't grow weary. Don't say, well, it's been 2,000 years. Be faithful. Don't party with the drunkards and live however, thinking, well, I'll just get right in the end. We must be faithful, because you don't know whether the Lord will return or when your end may come. We're called to be faithful until the Lord returns. We're not to worry about the date. We're to worry about honoring God, serving God, and living our life. So the biggest breath of fresh air for me with the end time stuff is when I said, you know what? I don't need to predict it. I just got to be faithful and do his work and disciple people until he comes. Certain things he's going to give us signs for that have already passed, the destruction of the temple. Other things he's not going to give us any signs for, such as his second coming. So let's live our life in faithfulness to Christ. We'll see you tomorrow.